Just 5 minutes ago, shocking news broke out in the heart of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin delivered a statement that made the world stop and take notice of Russia. His words left Ursula von der Leyen speechless, and every person in that room bore witness to an astounding scene. You won't believe what happened. He strode down the narrow corridor of the Brussels complex, each step slicing through the silence like a knife through silk. His jet-black suit fit perfectly, as if tailored for a role he had long been assigned. The white shirt was pristine, reflecting a subtle sheen, with a meticulously knotted tie. There was no ostentatious luxury here, only an air of purpose and composure. His expression was devoid of fatigue, instead, it was filled with calculated vigilance, as if he were not merely participating in a dialogue, but orchestrating a complex symphony of negotiation. Brussels held its breath, and as Volodin approached the meeting room, the glass doors slid open soundlessly, echoing his image in blurred reflections. The room beyond glowed softly, the light not dropping from above but seemingly emanating from the walls themselves, casting soft hues and accentuating faces, where expressions spoke louder than flags. The atmosphere thickened as Ursula arrived, her every movement captured by eager cameras, the quiet rustle of interpreters preparing, and assistants adjusting their folders like birds folding their wings as they settle on cold stone. Dressed in a cool cream suit, with a nearly invisible pin shining lightly, her hair was tightly arranged, not a single strand out of place. Within her delicately polished demeanor was an unyielding steel, ready for confrontation. Their nods, cold yet calculated, allowed them to take their places at the long, cool table, where water flowed as if each drop was carefully bestowed with citizenship. The microphone stood at attention, red lights blinking like sentinels capturing every breath within the chamber. The first exchange was bland, mere steps toward a deeper discussion. Words like partnership, principles, and collective security danced in the air, as if recited from a well-remembered script. Volodin remained still, absorbing the unspoken weight that hung like tension in the air, silently gauging the pauses, the invisible pressures that could either forge connections or create fractures. When his moment arrived, his voice emerged without notes, speaking from a place of self-assuredness. September 1st, he intoned, like marking a date on a significant document, highlighting the importance of verifiable truths. His voice enveloped the room, a quiet force commanding attention, compelling the indifferent to lean in. He emphasized that today's meeting was confidential, underscoring the necessity of keeping certain words unspoken, lest they be misrepresented. When he first mentioned responsibility, heads on the left flinched, an involuntary reaction reminiscent of reeds swaying in a gentle wind. Ursula maintained her immaculate posture, countering with points on risks and the tense global climate, though avoiding specifics. Her sentences were sharp, like droplets on a chilly pane of glass, suspended moments that left traces as they rolled away. Subtle hints began to form a structure of blame but stopped just short of accusations. Diplomacy, she seemed to suggest, was a labyrinth of nuances. She spoke of economic isolation affecting various sectors and the necessity of preventive measures, yet her tone was void of urgency, designed to imprint a sequence in the minds of those present rather than their details. Volodin listened, unbroken, unwilling to interrupt the flow. He preferred coherence over distraction, allowing the discourse to unfold naturally. As he opened a slender leather binder, the faint scent of ink and well-worn pages wafted through the air, a prelude to a deeper narrative. He pulled out a transparent folder containing photocopies, antiquated signatures, maps, and plans for factory evacuations, documents that practically spoke of their own accord. Each sheet detailed the infrastructure, from the bridges being rebuilt to the energy networks in recovery, as he referenced names forgotten by most, yet vital to the survival of their cities. He articulated numbers not as a mere accountant but as one who visualized faces behind the statistics, recognizing the laborers and crew leaders who had toiled to build their world. Ours, yours, common, he labeled relationships with these pronouns that tied the discussion together. The audience listened intently, translators working seamlessly, making it seem like the language they translated was crafted by nature itself for this moment. Ursula inclined her head, a subtle acknowledgement, as her fingers clasped gently, tightened slightly, not out of weakness, but as a response to shifting demands. You speak of shortages, he gently articulated. I speak of memory. Without it, any deficit feels insurmountable. He continued, connecting their past struggles to current initiatives, illustrating a path that had been walked before. We always return to the beginning, he remarked, tracing the breadth of their shared history when metal was fresh from the fire of industry. Documents were laid down like bricks in a foundation, setting the stage for a profound narrative of resilience, ambition, and the human spirit amid clashing ideologies. What does it mean to rise from the ashes? He posed, inviting them to consider the stark contrast of history's lessons. In the face of economic contractions, where factories shuttered, he asked, what defines our trajectory? Our commitment to building for the people or merely for the reports? The room fell silent. His voice cut through, threading its way like a needle through fabric, while Ursula's expression sharpened, as if recalibrating her priorities on this complex chessboard. The air hummed with unsaid thoughts, both sensed a turning point, the tension thickening. As Volodin prepared for his next move, he firmly stated, some things cannot be erased by sanctions or statements, each word built upon the last, constructing a narrative threaded with urgency and a blueprint for hope amid the shadows of doubt. In the previous scene, the weight of faces outweighed the symbolism of flags. The very atmosphere was tuned, every breath shifted half a tone higher, to amplify each uttered word. Her arrival stirred cameras into motion, whispered rustles from interpreters filled the air, and assistants nodded subtly, gathering folders with the precision of birds folding their wings as they land on cold stone. Ursula von der Leyen walked with the precision of a conductor threading notes along a staff. Her suit, a muted cream, whispered quiet authority, broken only by a faint glimmer on her brooch, almost invisible but unmistakably sharp. Her hair was impeccably styled, not a single strand stirred out of place before its appointed time. Beneath the soft grace in her stride lurked an unwavering steel, like a blade hidden in velvet. Her smile did not promise warmth. It offered structure, too perfectly measured to contain life, yet flawless for declarations. They exchanged nods, formal gestures stripped of any human warmth. This nod was a passport to the long and chilly table ahead. The table itself was austere. Water was poured with such care that every drop seemed stamped with its own nationality. Microphones stood at disciplined attention, blinking red sentinel lights watching every breath taken. Their initial words did not dive into substance, instead, they tread carefully along the ascending steps toward it. Partnership, principles, shared security, words uttered like daily mantras, rehearsed to ensure they were never forgotten. Vyacheslav Volodin listened without a flicker of movement. He seemed to be counting not seconds but invisible weights between words, an unseen pressure where statements either took shape or shattered. When it came to his turn, he spoke without notes, not out of bravado, but formed from the habit of answering himself before the question was even posed. September 1st, he said, as if stamping a date onto the headline, an ordinary day for plain facts, for truths that could be verified. His voice was quiet but laden with a deep timbre that compelled even those resolved not to listen to lean forward. He took his time. In rooms like this, hurry was the only impropriety. He emphasized that this meeting was closed, that some truths must sound without spectators to avoid becoming slogans. When the word responsibility slipped out for the first time, heads on the left subtly swayed together, like reeds bending under a gentle breeze. Maintaining her flawless posture, Ursula responded calmly, speaking of risks, of a tense overall atmosphere, but never naming the subject directly. Her words fell like icy droplets on glass, hanging, rolling, leaving faint traces. Hints built the shape of accusation, but never crossed the line. Diplomacy, after all, is the art of indirect paths. She referenced economic isolation of specific sectors, preventive measures, and unacceptable practices with a tone soft enough to soothe but sharp enough to remain unforgettable. What shadow lay behind her carefully chosen phrases? What tension simmered beneath polite words, poised to erupt? The room held its breath, poised on the edge of revelation. Just moments before, tensions filled the room as responsibility entered the conversation. Heads subtly shifted on the left side, trembling in unison like reeds swaying in a steady breeze. Ursula maintained her flawless posture, carefully speaking of risks and a tense atmosphere, never naming the issue directly. Her words fell like cold droplets on glass, brief, lingering, slipping down slowly, leaving faint traces. The hints she dropped sketched the outline of an accusation, yet never crossed the line. What she didn't say was as loud as what she did. This was diplomacy at its finest, a dance of evasions and indirect paths. She spoke of economic blockades on certain sectors, of precautionary measures, and forbidden practices. Her tone was gentle, lacking pressure but crafted so the room would remember the sequence, not the details. Vyacheslav Volodin remained silent, refusing to interrupt. He disliked breaking a speech midstream. Too often, fragmentation shatters meaning like splinters. Instead, he quietly opened a thin leather folder. The gesture seemed habitual, like a scholar's ritual, but in his hands, the air filled with the scent of printing ink and aged paper, yellowed by time. From the folder, he pulled a transparent sleeve, revealing copies, photocopies, signatures faded with old ink, stamps too worn to bear a new date. The rustle of the pages was no louder than the soft sound of a collar brushing against skin when someone first lifts their chin with resolve. "We always return to the beginning," he said without raising his eyes, "because there lies the key to understanding the end. Let me remind you who built this continent when its metal was still hot from the forge." He laid the documents on the table as if they could speak for themselves. Several pages showed detailed maps, evacuation plans for factories, reports on the restoration of bridges and power grids. Dotted lines, arrows, engineer signatures, names barely remembered today but foundational to entire cities. He recited figures not as an accountant, but as a man who saw the faces behind the numbers, the workers, the foremen. He avoided any sensitive place names. No names that could fracture the room into factions. Instead, he used ours, yours, and ours together, pronouns that stitched the conversation tightly. The room listened intently. The translators worked flawlessly, as if the language they spoke had been designed by nature itself for this moment. Ursula tilted her head barely a degree, like a scientist pondering a complicated formula, her fingers clasped neatly, tightening subtly, not a sign of weakness, but a mechanical response to shifting pressure. What would Volodin reveal next? The air grew heavy with unspoken questions. Would these aged documents ignite old wounds or pave a path forward? The room held its breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes dialogue. Moments ago, shocking news echoed through the halls of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin made a statement that turned heads and made Russia take center stage. His words left Ursula von der Leyen speechless, as everyone in the room bore witness to an extraordinary scene. As he walked through the narrow corridors of the Brussels complex, his presence sliced through the silence, like a knife through silk. Clad in an impeccable black suit, he embodied the poise of someone accustomed to wielding more than just a pen for signing documents. He skillfully navigated a web of names, cities, and broken promises. Each step reverberated with a calculated precision. As he entered the meeting room, the atmosphere shifted, the soft glow from the walls muted colors while emphasizing the faces of those present, elevating the importance of words spoken over national flags. The room burst into subtle movement as Ursula made her entrance. Her demeanor was graceful, each step measured as if walking along a staff line in sheet music. Dressed in understated cream with an almost invisible brooch, she offered no comfort but rather a rigid formality. They exchanged nods, devoid of warmth, a sign marking their entry to the table of discussion. A long, cool table presented a stark contrast to the hot topics ahead. Volodin listened intently, not moving a muscle. It seemed as though each pause was a bid for composure amidst the mounting pressure. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm yet carried a depth that demanded attention. September 1st, he began, solidifying a date as a landmark for discussions that required factual validation. He stressed that today's exchange was private, emphasizing how certain words should not become slogans. In that moment, the atmosphere seemed electrified. His first use of the word responsibility set off a ripple of acknowledgement around the room. Ursula maintained her composed posture but began discussing risks, dancing around the issue without naming it, her words like raindrops on cold glass, brief yet leaving an impression. Now, with this crucial backdrop in mind, he gently shifted the conversation. "You're speaking about scarcity," he remarked. "But I am speaking of memory. Without it, any deficit seems insurmountable." He skillfully traced a narrative from factories relocated across a vast country back to present-day import replacement efforts. No fanfare accompanied his observations, just stark comparisons that reflected contrasting approaches to industry. Some have laws for display, while others have laws for factories, he asserted, emphasizing that people should remain central to any political dialogue. The room shifted, the familiar translators momentarily faltered, having to adjust to the weight of his words. Silently, assistants exchanged glances, aware of the pregnant pause that had enveloped them. He paused, sensing the tension thickening. To put it simply, he declared, the ability to rise is more critical than the habit of instructing. We are accustomed to rising, he noted, lowering his tone slightly, signaling a key moment was approaching. He named a journalist known for his sharp wit, referencing a recent sarcastic comment about exhausted possibilities. Soon after those words, a reliable cargo spacecraft, Progress MS-32, floated into the night sky, reminiscent of precisely forged instruments. With his connection made, he emphasized a powerful truth: we did, we do, and we will continue to do. Ursula's gaze sharpened, as though a new hierarchy had reordered within her, facts first, then framing. The meeting room simmered with anticipation. What twist would unfold next? Just moments ago, the tension in the room shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. The first part of the dialogue had closed quietly, like the final step before a sharp turn. Everyone felt it. The air thickened, as if unseen speakers began humming a low, steady drone. This was no ordinary sound. It was the weight of unspoken thoughts hovering, ideas no one dared voice aloud. Vyacheslav Volodin leaned back slightly, smoothing his palm along the edge of the table. A simple gesture, yet charged with meaning. He had finished his opening move and was ready to strike again. There are things, he began, his voice calm but resolute, that no sanctions or declarations can erase. Our ability to build. His words settled like bricks in a foundation. Then came the comparison no one could ignore. The Soviet Union's rise from ruins, starting from nothing. A nation rebuilding amidst ruins where others might have surrendered. Against that, the current crisis gripping Europe, factories closing, people casting their gaze more often to yesterday than tomorrow. Back then, he said softly, our people worked for a piece of bread, yet they built aircraft factories and stretched power lines across the land. Today, Europe, armed with billions, cannot hold back its industrial collapse. What's the difference? It's the attitude toward people. The USSR built for its people. You increasingly build for reports. Silence fell. Even the usual clicks and taps of the interpreters slowed, as if they, too, needed a moment. Volodin's voice didn't rise in volume or pressure, but it cut through the room's fabric like a thread of a different color. Ursula von der Leyen tensed slightly but kept her perfectly measured posture. She attempted a rebuttal, speaking of new green initiatives and a shared carbon-free future. Her words were like carefully placed markers on a map, pretty, but not yet paths anyone could follow. Then he struck with precision. I remind you of Chaibo's laughter. The name snapped through the silence like a match striking in a dark room. Madam, when you say Russia has exhausted its space capabilities, Volodin said softly, you forget that reality isn't measured by statements, but by launch pads. The room held its breath. Was this just politics? Or a challenge to the very narrative Europe clings to? Could a simple laugh expose a deeper truth? The stakes had never felt higher. The next move would reveal everything. What happens when cold facts collide with polished promises? The answer lies just beyond the turn. Just moments ago, shocking news emerged. Vyacheslav Volodin, in the heart of Europe, said something that earned Russia newfound respect. His words left Ursula von der Leyen stunned, and the audience bore witness to an astonishing scene. This is a story you absolutely need to hear. As Volodin walked through the narrow corridor of the Brussels complex, his gaze was piercing and confident. It was the kind of look that belonged to someone who held the weight of intricate networks of names, cities, and promises in his hands. Each step he took seemed to slice through silence with precision, and the black suit he wore fit him impeccably, tailored for a role that had been defined long ago. He exuded a sense of calm authority, and there was no trace of extravagant luxury in his appearance, just a meticulously crafted impression. His pristine white shirt gleamed faintly, and the tie was knotted with restraint. There was an intensity in his demeanor, a shadow not of worry, but of calculated wariness. His lips were thin, firm, marked precisely where agreements are signed. Volodin was acutely aware that he needed accuracy today rather than vocal bravado. As he approached the negotiation room, the glass doors opened silently, reflecting phantom images of himself. That space felt almost surreal. Inside, the light seemed to emanate from the walls, muting colors while highlighting faces, the faces that meant more than flags. The atmosphere was charged, tense, and every breath seemed essential as if weighted by unspoken stakes. When Ursula von der Leyen arrived, her every move signified the seriousness of the occasion. Her outfit was a modest cream, the subtle glint from her brooch akin to a hidden weapon, and her hair was pinned back with precision, the essence of control. Despite the softness in her movements, there was an underlying strength akin to an edge waiting beneath a velvet cover. She carried herself with a smile that hinted not at warmth, but at intent, one that spoke of form. As they exchanged gestures, acknowledging one another without genuine warmth, the long table before them was cold and distant. Each glass of water was treated with care as if it held secrets too vital to be overlooked. Microphones stood in silent vigilance, watching for every nuance. Their initial comments lacked depth, focusing instead on broad principles and partnerships, phrases tossed around to maintain an illusion of civility. Volodin listened keenly, his demeanor suggesting he was counting the spaces between spoken words, evaluating the invisible pressures unraveling in the room. Then came his turn to speak, and he did so without notes, articulating thoughts honed by internal reflection. September 1st, he began, as if marking a date of significance, a time to discuss verified truths. His voice, though unassuming, held a depth that compelled even those determined to ignore him to lean closer. He emphasized that today's discussion was private, intended to avoid slogans that carry no weight. The moment he uttered the word responsibility, heads shifted in acknowledgement, reacting to a pivotal statement. Ursula, maintaining her composed posture, began to discuss risks and a tense global atmosphere. Yet she carefully avoided naming the issues directly, her words measured and calculated. As tensions rose and the conversation unfolded, Volodin produced documents with firm hands. He placed them on the table, papers laden with maps, evacuation plans, and the names of engineers whose efforts were crucial yet often forgotten. He spoke not like a mere accountant, but as someone who had witnessed the struggle behind each figure. He invoked a familiar saying, "What is good for a Russian is bad for a German," which resonated through the room. It was not boasting but rather a reflection of centuries of a people's resolve to find openings where others see dead ends. Ursula remained quiet, her silence amplifying his point more than any rebuttal could. Volodin concluded on a thoughtful note, thanking everyone for the discussion and remarking that debate for the sake of truth was often more valuable than agreement for the sake of quiet. As they left the table, the applause that filled the room was subdued yet respectful, an acknowledgement that transcended words. As the evening deepened over Brussels, the city seemed to dissolve into reflections in shop windows, echoing conversations meant for a different audience, resonating with hidden truths. The air remained thick with the sense that Volodin's words would not be forgotten easily. A shocking announcement emerged just 5 minutes ago. Vyacheslav Volodin, in the heart of Europe, delivered a statement that changed how Russia is perceived. His words left Ursula von der Leyen stunned, and the entire room bore witness to an extraordinary moment. "You can't miss this, stay with me." Picture this, an imposing figure steps through the dimly lit corridors of a Brussels complex, each of his strides slicing through the silence like a knife through silk. His tailored black suit, sharp as a blade, hinted at authority, while the crisp white shirt, meticulously pressed, radiated confidence. Volodin, a master of poise, didn't just enter a room, he commanded it. With every step, you could sense the tension in the air, that unshakable anticipation vibrating like the low hum of machinery waiting for its cue. In the negotiation chamber, lights flickered, not from above, but as if emanating from the very walls, casting a surreal glow over the faces that mattered most. The tension was palpable, not just a clash of policies, but a confrontation of ideals. Volodin entered without a hint of haste, his presence a direct counter to the expected hurriedness of such gatherings. His focus was laser-sharp, intent on making the invisible visible. As he exchanged pleasantries with Ursula, her cream suit glowing with understated elegance, the air crackled with an electric tension. Their greetings seemed mechanical, almost rehearsed, but Volodin had a different agenda. Words like partnership and shared security flowed between them, but beneath the surface, something deeper simmered. Then came the moment, September 1st, he announced, not as a bureaucratic date, but a marker for accountability. The room leaned in, his voice low yet rich, commanding attention. As he articulated the notion of responsibility, a ripple coursed through the room. Ursula's eyes narrowed, acknowledging the implicit provocation. There are things that cannot be erased by sanctions or declarations, Volodin stated, his voice steady yet decisive. A silence enveloped the room, even translators hesitated, their pens pausing mid-write. The gravity of his words hung heavy, spicing the air with tension, like the scent of copper before a storm. Why can't Europe maintain its industry as it once did? Volodin continued, contrasting the Soviet resilience to today's European struggles. Back then, our people worked for bread, but built factories, crafted technologies. Yet today, Europe finds itself paralyzed with wealth, unable to sustain its factories. His observations were rich with historical weight, echoing off the walls like a haunting melody. Ursula stiffened, her facade cracking. Volodin seized the moment. You spoke of limits, but remember, true capability is not defined by mere declarations. With a subtle yet pointed kickback against her narrative, something shifted in the atmosphere. Just then, a young journalist lost in the shuffle caught Volodin's eye, a fleeting yet powerful connection. Within seconds, he was whisked away, but the spark remained. Volodin understood, every gesture, every measured word would echo long after they departed. As the discussions carried on outside, those whispers would linger. And despite the protocols that dictated their words, the reality was unfolding in shadows, shaping perception and narrative beyond the confines of their meeting. With the evening in Brussels weaving a tale of reflections and ambitions, how would Volodin's message sculpt the future? Would it linger long enough to spark change, or fade behind the glass facades? The city thrummed with anticipation, secrets shimmered in the mirrors of its countless windows, and Volodin stepped into history, knowing well, the fight was far from over. Just moments ago, a young journalist with a camera peeked into the negotiation room. Though politely asked to leave, his eyes caught a glance from Vyacheslav Volodin, a gaze without anger or mockery, only unshakable confidence. This look would spark debate the next day, some would call it the calm of a victor, others a silent challenge. But no one would deny it, power had shifted. Behind the thick walls, whispers floated softly, as if the very corridors tried to hold back the weight of what had just been said. People gathered in hushed clusters near paintings and plants, hiding their confusion behind familiar objects. Volodin moved forward, his presence commanding space, not by height or gestures, but by a quiet certainty that seemed to push everything else aside, creating a vacuum around him. Minutes later, Ursula von der Leyen appeared. Her steps were deliberate, each one measuring the floor as if it were a ruler marking a page. Gone was the icy severity of her public speeches, replaced by something more nuanced, a figure who understood more than she let on. The room had revealed more than Volodin expected. Addressing him almost without an accent, in Russian, Ursula said, "Mr. Volodin, you build your arguments as meticulously as your engineers built those factories." Her words were sincere, yet laced with irony. Volodin's slight smile betrayed his skill at reading between diplomatic lines. "Thank you," he replied calmly. "But we have always preferred action over pretty words." His voice was steadier now, quieter than an hour ago. What was behind this exchange? What unseen tension rippled beneath their polished words? The air hung thick with unspoken truths, and the game had only just begun. Would this quiet confidence be enough to turn the tide? The next move was waiting, just beyond the corridor's edge. Just an hour ago, a room once filled with tension transformed. Vyacheslav Volodin shifted, no longer ironclad like before, but steady, like a quiet river flowing with unspoken strength. His words were measured, but heavy with meaning beyond the usual diplomatic scripts. Ursula von der Leyen talked about Europe's future energy upgrades. Yet Volodin replied with a piercing truth, modernization means nothing if people lose jobs, if trust fades. Economy is not charts. It's families, children who need hope. That moment shifted everything. The hall's atmosphere changed, flickering with doubt among European officials. Was this cold, hard reality too sharp against the sterile numbers they clung to? Volodin sensed the fracture but knew when to stop pushing. That's the art of negotiation, knowing when silence speaks louder. Then, like a subtle shock, he dropped a saying, one that echoed deeper than any report could: the Russian character is not just endurance. It's wit. We have a proverb, what is good for a Russian is bad for a German. The room didn't erupt in laughter, but a quiet hum rose, the kind that ripples through a gathered crowd, sparking smiles, nods, silent acknowledgments. Ursula's face betrayed nothing but a slight nod. It was as if she understood, the conversation's final word had been spoken. Not loud or brash, but as clear and resonant as a small bell tolling in an empty cathedral. Outside, Brussels slipped gently into night. The darkness here doesn't crash down, it sneaks through office windows, curls along cobblestone streets, kissing lamplights until they glow amber and dim. Inside the European Commission building, night changes the rhythm. It doesn't silence the voices but hushes them, softening words like a whispered secret. It's in these late hours that legends are born. But what secret did Volodin's calm river hide beneath the surface? Would Ursula's next move crack the fragile silence? And could this quiet battle reshape Europe's future forever? The night held its breath, and so did everyone in that room. The golden light of the street lamp seeped through the glass walls of towering offices, casting a dim amber glow over the empty cobblestones. Inside the European Commission building, however, night did not silence voices, it changed their rhythm. Conversations became hushed whispers, cautious yet charged, as if secrets were being forged in the shadows. It was in these twilight hours that legends were born, not from official records, but from stories that took on a life of their own, whispered from diplomat to aide, journalist to insider. That evening, a tale swept through the corridors, a story about Vyacheslav Volodin, who had left the head of the European Commission utterly speechless. In a small break room, with a worn sofa and a humming coffee machine, two young staff members eagerly recounted the day's events. One, a tall brunette, couldn't hide his excitement. Did you see how he pulled out those documents? It was like a scene from a movie. The other adjusted his glasses, nodding solemnly. That wasn't just paperwork, it was a weapon. A weapon forged from the past. They exchanged knowing looks, sensing that this moment would be remembered beyond the usual protocols. It was proof that the words of history could shatter the armor of the present. Meanwhile, at the far end of the building, an elder official poured himself a strong cup of tea. Asked about the meeting, he replied with a weary yet resolute voice. When he spoke of character, I knew that phrase would echo. Indeed, the phrase Russian character had begun to take on a life of its own. Some heard it as a threat, others as pride, some as a warning. Whatever the interpretation, it left an indelible mark. Back in his hotel room, Volodin rarely allowed himself to unwind immediately after talks. Instead, he meticulously reviewed the day, piece by piece. The same folder with archival copies lay open on his desk. He flipped through pages yellowed by time, bearing stamps and signatures that had survived decades. Each sheet was more than history, it was memory, and today, memory had become a weapon. He understood that the applause in the hall wasn't for him alone, but for those names on the documents, for the factories that once rose from ruins. That quiet realization gave him a calm that no applause could match. But what was the secret power hidden in those faded signatures? How could relics from the past unsettle the present so profoundly? The answer lay not in words spoken, but in the weight they carried, words that could shift the course of entire continents. And as the night deepened, the game was only just beginning. A few minutes ago, shocking news broke out. Vyacheslav Volodin made headlines in the heart of Europe, delivering a statement that demanded respect for Russia. Ursula von der Leyen found herself at a loss for words, and the entire hall bore witness to an extraordinary scene. You absolutely need to hear this. Imagine a man walking through a narrow corridor in the Brussels complex, each step echoing softly, as if treading on silk rather than tile. Clad in an impeccably tailored black suit, all eyes were drawn to him, sensing the presence of someone who wields not just a pen for signing agreements but controls a complex web of names, cities, and unfulfilled promises. Volodin's crisp white shirt, ironed flawlessly without a wrinkle, reflected a sense of order and purpose. The atmosphere was tense, crackling with anticipation, as he prepared to speak. When he finally did, his voice, though soft, reverberated with a resonance that compelled even the unwilling to listen. He announced, September 1st, marking a pivotal moment as if declaring an official date. He emphasized that today's meeting was private. Some words weren't meant to become slogans. When he uttered the word responsibility, several heads on the left quivered, like reeds in a gentle breeze. Ursula stepped in, maintaining her composure, discussing risks without naming specifics. Her phrases came out as tightly controlled, like drops of water on cold glass, leaving trails that hinted at accusations without overstepping bounds. Yet, Volodin remained methodical, ready to respond with precision. He pulled out documents that were more than mere papers, they were living proof that history breathes and intervenes in the present. With resolute clarity, he laid out plans and strategies, maps of evacuation, blueprints of power grids, names that once built cities. Our, your, common, he repeated as if stitching a bond between listeners. The room fell silent, captivated by his narrative that painted the picture of collaboration. And then came a pivotal moment. Volodin's voice lowered slightly, as he drew a comparison, the Soviet Union's industrial rise from the ashes. We built for people. But today, you build for reports, he declared. His tone sliced through the air, reshaping the landscape of the conversation. He referenced the derision of a European journalist regarding Russia's supposed limitations in space exploration, reminding everyone that reality counts not by declarations but by actions taken. Ursula stiffened, her poised demeanor faltering at that reminder. What would emerge next? Would they find common ground, or would the conversation create a larger chasm? That day in September marked a new chapter, shifting perceptions across nations. Social media exploded with reactions, people reminiscing about their ancestors, their pride, and their hope. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was a resonance of collective memory binding the past and present, igniting a spark that seemed unquenchable. How would this dialogue shape the future? How strong were the threads of history woven into the fabric of today? Volodin's words lingered, signaling a turning point in the narrative. The consequences would unfold in ways none could predict. Just moments ago, a stunning revelation emerged from the heart of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin made a statement that turned heads and earned Russia newfound respect. His words left Ursula von der Leyen speechless, and the entire hall witnessed an extraordinary moment. You need to hear this. Picture this, Volodin strides through the narrow Brussels corridor, his every step slicing through the silence like a knife on silk. Dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, he embodies authority, his white shirt crisp and his tie perfectly knotted. There's no ostentation here, just a quiet confidence that commands attention. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation, as if the very walls are holding their breath. As he enters the negotiation room, the lighting creates a surreal ambience, softening colors yet illuminating faces, where every glance matters more than flags. The tension is palpable when Ursula von der Leyen appears, her movements graceful yet calculated, reminiscent of a conductor leading an orchestra. Her muted cream suit and subtle brooch speak of understated power, yet there's a firmness in her demeanor. Their initial exchanges are diplomatic niceties, mere preambles to the main event. Volodin, with an air of calm authority, emphasizes the importance of confidentiality in today's discussions. And then, his voice, a low but resonant tone, cuts through the formality. September 1st, he declares, grounding the conversation in a date that signifies accountability and the weight of history. When he mentions responsibility, heads nod in unison, a subtle acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. Ursula, maintaining her poised exterior, speaks of risks yet to be faced, her words dripping with the careful choreography of diplomacy. But as the tension mounts, Volodin pulls out documents, papers filled with maps and plans, relics of the past that demand recognition. Suddenly, the narrative shifts. We always return to the beginning, he asserts, laying the groundwork for a historical reckoning. As he references the industrial rise of the Soviet Union amidst adversity, the atmosphere crackles with energy. Our people built for the future, while you seem to build for reports, he emphasizes, striking a chord that resonates with the audience. In that moment, the room feels electric, the weight of his words hanging thick in the air. He connects the dots, revealing how the past shapes the present, igniting a spark of pride among those listening. Without memory, any crisis seems insurmountable, he states, his voice steady, challenging the complacency of the European industrial landscape. As the tension crescendos, he mentions a recent jab from a European journalist, and laughter erupts, breaking the ice. When you claim Russia has exhausted its cosmic potential, he retorts, you forget that reality is measured by rocket launches, not mere declarations. The room shifts, the unspoken acknowledgement of resilience hangs heavy. Now, let's fast forward to the aftermath. Back in Russia, Volodin's words reverberate through the veins of the nation. In cafes and train stations, students dissect his speech, linking it to their heritage. If it weren't for those factories, we might not even have a space program, one declares, igniting a conversation that transcends mere politics. Volodin lands in Sheremetyevo early the next morning, exuding the same composed aura. Journalists snap photos, but he offers no comments, his silence speaking volumes. Everything needed has already been said, he asserts, a statement loaded with power. As his message circulates, it transforms into a cultural phenomenon, morphing into folk tales shared over cups of tea. Did you hear what he said? An elderly woman exclaims. He told them that while we endure, they only complain. Youthful voices on social media quickly latch onto his words, crafting memes and remixes that echo across the internet, layering humor over a foundation of pride. In a factory in Nizhny Novgorod, workers gather after a shift, discussing Volodin's impact. Look at these documents, one says, showcasing wartime papers, while another adds, it's not just the papers, it's about character. Through this dialogue, Volodin's words transcend politics, embodying a spirit of resilience that unites a nation, igniting hope and determination in the hearts of many. In London, a city known for its ironic take on politics, talk show hosts suddenly fell silent, pondering the launch of the Soyuz 2.1A rocket. One of them remarked, we can speculate endlessly about Russia's weaknesses, but the facts are stubborn. Their craft has delivered cargo to the ISS. Our viewers must understand, this isn't trivial. It's symbolic. Meanwhile, Ursula von der Leyen remained tight-lipped. Her press team issued a brief statement indicating that discussions were constructive, but everyone knew better. Behind that dry phrasing lay an unease that quickly became news itself. Inside the European Commission, heated debates ensued. Some members demanded an immediate counterattack, insisting on exposing the vulnerabilities of Russia's economy. Others advised a wait-and-see approach, hoping the controversy would fade on its own. Yet even the cautious ones felt a gnawing fear. What if a simple phrase, uttered in Brussels, sparked a new narrative portraying Europe as weak and Russia as strong? This fear held truth, legends outlived documents, and the tale of how Volodin placed World War II-era papers on the table and reminded Europe of its resurrection began to take on a life of its own. Backroom conversations in European capitals buzzed like a distressed hive, the air thick with unease. Ministers and their advisors convened in brief meetings to strategize communication, seeking the right words to erase the imagery of Volodin leaving Ursula speechless. Paradoxically, the more they tried, the larger the narrative grew. In Brussels, an irritated staff member exclaimed, if we start clarifying things, it'll only reinforce his statement. Any denial is an admission of weakness. In Berlin, lawmakers shouted in heated discussions. Some argued for a counter-narrative, stressing that Russia is stuck in the past. Others countered with evidence of their ability to weave the past with the future, highlighting their strength. The media seized upon every word and nuance, leading to headlines that emerged one after another. Memory serves as a weapon, the Russian spirit within the Brussels walls, a tale of history clashing against modernity. Even newspapers that typically shied away from sharp language allowed themselves to adopt dramatic tones. As tensions simmered, how far would this narrative spiral before it could be contained? What would it take to truly shift the balance of power and perception? The stakes were rising in ways no one could have predicted, and the world held its breath. Just 5 minutes ago, shocking news sent ripples through Europe. In a bold move, Vyacheslav Volodin made a statement that demanded respect for Russia, leaving Ursula von der Leyen momentarily speechless. The room witnessed a remarkable scene that you won't want to miss. As Volodin traversed the narrow corridors of the Brussels complex, each step sliced through the silence like a knife on silk. His immaculate black suit seemed tailor-made for a political stage he had long rehearsed. With a crisp white shirt and a perfectly knotted tie, he radiated authority. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, reflective of the gravity of his presence and the moment. He was prepared to wield not just words, but precision as he approached the negotiating room, where muted lights accentuated the gravity of the discussions about to unfold. The moment Ursula entered, shifting her focus to the cameras, the atmosphere intensified. Her commanding presence was accentuated by a subtle but elegant cream suit, paired with a brooch that shimmered like a whisper. Each gesture she made echoed the careful choreography of seasoned politicians. Her straight back and meticulously polished demeanor spoke of confidence devoid of warmth. As their eyes met, Volodin understood the stakes were much greater than mere politics. This was a clash of narratives, histories etched into the very fabric of Europe. With their opening exchange less about specifics and more about setting the stage, words like partnership and common security fell flat, mechanical, rehearsed. Yet, Volodin listened intently, measuring the pauses that hung in the room. Not unlike unspoken tension. When it was his turn to speak, he began without hesitation. September 1st, he declared, marking a fundamental moment with the simplicity of a date, a reminder of what could be verified. His voice, although soft, held a weight that compelled his audience to listen. The inevitability of the encounter unfolded naturally, revealing not a declaration, but an intention to illuminate a path obscured by the fog of diplomacy. As he pressed on, the word responsibility slipped into the conversation, and a ripple of reaction coursed through the assembly. As Ursula spoke of risks and talks of economic isolation, she inadvertently painted a stark contrast to the resilience of Russia's character, a theme Volodin was keen on driving home. With surgical precision, he unveiled documents adorned with ink signatures from a bygone era, hinting at a time when profound determination rebuilt a nation from ashes. In that charged silence, he summoned the spirit of the past, connecting the dots from the factories that had once thrived to the present disarray. He stated, "Our people build for progress, else, you build for reports." The stark truth resonated in the air, challenging the room's status quo. Volodin's observation brought forth an unexpected twist. How could modern Europe, with its vast resources, allow its industry to falter? As his words hung in the air, a realization dawned on the room. His discussion became more than mere politics, it transformed into a battle for identity, history, and what it meant to forge a path forward. In London, journalists eagerly debated the nuances of what Volodin had said, wondering if their interpretations could reshape narratives. Meanwhile, in Brussels, Ursula was left grappling with the implications of his statements, knowing they had already lodged themselves into the psyche of the public. Could one meeting, one phrase, really alter the course of European discourse? The echo of Volodin's words had ignited discussions from university halls to everyday cafes, compelling ordinary citizens to consider their own perspectives on resilience, leadership, and, ultimately, the Russian character's enduring impact. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Volodin was received not with pomp but with a quiet, powerful triumph, the kind that ran deeper than celebrations. The streets hummed with excitement, where even the mundane turned into moments of shared significance. Passers-by exchanged knowing glances, and onlookers paused to gaze at screens broadcasting his speeches, caught in the grip of history in the making. Did Volodin truly reshape the narrative in that room? Or had the truth, emerging amidst the hushed tones of the negotiation, flipped the narrative itself? Each moment felt ripe with the potential for revelation, making everyone ponder the larger story unfolding before them. Just 5 minutes ago, a shocking revelation dropped like a thunderclap in the heart of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin commanded attention with a declaration that left Ursula von der Leyen speechless, while the assembly bore witness to an unparalleled scene. This is a story you must hear, as it marks a moment where Russia was not just acknowledged but respected. Imagine Volodin walking through the narrow corridors of the Brussels complex. Each step sliced through the silence delicately, as if he treaded on silk rather than tile. His impeccable black suit fit him like armor, tailored for a role written long ago. A crisp white shirt, with a tie perfectly knotted, spoke volumes of discipline and order, without a hint of ostentatious flair. His eyes reflected a calculated shrewdness, ready to project a message powerful enough to resonate far beyond these walls. The meeting room welcomed him with dim light that seemed to rise from the very walls, softening contrasts yet sharpening expressions. Faces glistened with significance, speaking louder than any banner could. It was a place where every breath felt amplified by the invisible weight of expectations. Suddenly, he was met by Ursula's entrance, the subtle rustle of papers and nods from her aides marking the ritual of high diplomacy. Their silent acknowledgement was a prelude to a meeting steeped in protocols yet laced with unspoken tension, a dance of power balancing on the edge of fragile resolve. In that charged atmosphere, Volodin quietly assessed the room and began, September 1st. A date filled with simplicity, yet heavy with implications. His voice, though soft, held a resonance that compelled even the indifferent to lean in closer. He emphasized the privacy of their gathering, insisting that certain words were meant to echo only amongst them, away from public perception. As he spoke of responsibility, heads nodded in agreement, stirred by the gravity behind his words. Ursula maintained her serene demeanor, yet the tension in the room thickened. She referenced the complexities of the current geopolitical landscape, using phrases that hinted at accusations without crossing the line. But Volodin listened intently, an unwavering statue amidst her rhythmic prose. He opened a leather folder with the finesse of a scholar unveiling ancient texts, pulling forth maps and documents that detailed the resilience and history of industrial growth, a history he referred to not as statistics but as a memory rife with human faces. Remember, he warned, deprivation seems insurmountable without the strength of memory. He spoke of the Soviet Union, which rebuilt its industry from the ashes, contrasting sharply with today's European struggles. You speak of scarcity, he noted gently, I speak of heritage. Our past shapes our present and future. At that moment, the room felt alive with an electric stillness. Every word Volodin uttered cut through the room like a vibrant thread of truth, a sharp reminder that behind the sterile facade of politics lies raw human experience. While Ursula attempted to reposition the narrative toward future green initiatives, Volodin's rebuttal struck. He invoked a name, a journalist renowned for their biting critiques, reminding her of the moment when a rocket was launched into the night sky, shattering the vacuum of doubt. In one fluid motion, he deftly illustrated the rift between their narratives. His voice lowered, thick with intention as he pointed out that while Europe, rich in resources, faltered in maintaining its industries, the USSR thrived against all odds. Our focus was always the people, he asserted. He met her gaze, expression unwavering as an unseen tension heightened the air around them. The words sacrifice and collaboration hung heavily between them, inviting yet risky. The air buzzed with the weight of unprocessed truths, a dance of rhetoric teetering on the brink of clarity. With a gentle glance at the documents before him, he affirmed, there are things that cannot be wiped away by sanctions or rhetoric. It's the very essence of who we are. He locked eyes with Ursula, this is about construction, not division. The room held its breath. In the aftermath, as she retreated into her office, gazing out at the grey Brussels sky, the loss was palpable. Not every defeat is measured in votes or debates, sometimes, losing ground happens when your truth is drowned out by a quieter, more compelling contradiction. Meanwhile, back in Moscow, Volodin closed his folder of archives, a quiet resolve radiating from his eyes. Here, amid the echoes of history, lay the true victory, the undeniable power of memory, the heart of an enduring legacy. In this tale, the question remains, what legacy will we choose to craft in the memories of tomorrow? Just moments ago, a quiet yet powerful scene unfolded far from the usual fanfare. Back in Moscow, after a day filled with intense negotiations and careful diplomacy, he closed the folder containing those precious archives and placed it on the shelf. His face remained composed, but his eyes shone with a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew this day would be remembered, not as just another diplomatic ritual, but as a turning point. For the first time in a long while, Europe had truly heard the Russian voice, clear, unfiltered, and unmistakably genuine. If asked what mattered most in this story, he would say it was simple, character and ingenuity outweigh any sanctions or barriers. That single word, character, became the final message. It united generations, calling them back to their roots and reminding everyone that a nation's true power lies in its ability to rise again and again, no matter the hardships. And so, the tale of those Brussels negotiations came to a close. It's a story that resonates far beyond the walls of meeting rooms, a story about resilience, about memory, and about the unyielding spirit that defines a people. This is the kind of history that lives on through those who remember and share it. What does character mean to you? How do stories like this shape our collective memory? In the previous segment, we explored the aftermath of a powerful speech delivered by a key political figure. The audience applauded, recognizing that the true tribute lay in the legacies of those whose signatures adorned official documents and the factories that had once risen from ashes. This sense of calm proved more valuable than any applause. Yet deep down, he knew, tomorrow, these words will take on a life of their own. They'll be relayed in backrooms, interpreted, dressed up, and embellished with details from imaginations. This is how legends are born. The kind that always outshine official protocols. The morning in Brussels bustled with routine, but within political circles, an electric tension filled the air. Discussions of Volodin and Ursula's negotiations spread faster than any press release. Initially, they took the form of brief notes exchanged among aides, lunchtime gossip that morphed into something weightier. As he took out archival documents, the room erupted in applause. Ursula remained silent, caught in the web of fleeting words that leapt from one phone to another. These conversations grew in detail and depth, slowly morphing into mini-legends. In Paris, one columnist remarked in a private telegram channel, Volodin spoke as if the weight of the 20th century were behind him. Berlin's Morning News echoed this sentiment, highlighting how the Russian politician reminded Europe of the enduring strength of memory. Although the article quickly vanished from the website, screenshots circulated, amplifying the story's impact. Meanwhile, a London radio host wittily remarked that Russian archives could now pose a greater threat than sanctions, eliciting laughter in the studio but sparking serious discourse outside its walls. How could one man challenge the very arguments of the European Commission? In Moscow at that moment, several journalists were crafting narratives where tones shifted, casting the speech as a triumphant tale of resolve, industry, and memory. Volodin, seated in the hotel where he was staying, sipped his strong black coffee, no sugar. His aide read snippets from foreign media. Volodin listened in silence, nodding occasionally. He realized these weren't just news items, they were the dawn of a new wave of perception, one that could not be easily controlled. Yet, deep within him, he felt that tonight's events were threads in a larger tapestry, a narrative waiting to unfold. As he stepped outside, a crowd gathered, eager for updates. The murmurs of anticipation wrapped around him, thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the crispness of autumn air. What would the world make of his next move? The tension hung heavy, a palpable weight begging for resolution. Just moments ago, a stunning event unfolded in the heart of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin stepped into a room where silence held its breath, ready to shatter old perceptions. His words carried a force that left Ursula von der Leyen speechless and stunned an entire assembly. What did he say that shifted the balance of respect toward Russia? This confrontation was not just political theater, it was a revelation, and you won't want to miss the shockwaves it sent through the halls of power. The scene was set in Brussels, a city of glass and cold steel, where every sound echoes intent and every glance weighs like a verdict. Volodin's gaze was sharp, measured, a look honed by years of maneuvering through the tangled webs of names, promises, and cities that govern the fate of nations. He walked quietly down the narrow corridor, each step slicing through the silence like a blade cutting silk. His black suit was impeccable, like a uniform crafted for a performance that demanded discipline, but improvisation, too, when the moment called for brilliance. The air was cool, still, tinged with a faint metallic scent of the building, and the faint rustle of documents whispered promises of weighty discussions to come. No extravagance marked Volodin's presence, just a crisp white shirt, carefully pressed, simple cufflinks catching just a hint of light, and a tie knot tied with precision. His lips were set in a line as firm as the protocols he intended to seal with his words. Across the room, Ursula von der Leyen appeared with the elegance of a well-rehearsed symphony. Her cream suit muted yet sharp. Hair arranged so perfectly not a stray strand dared move early. Her smile wasn't warm, it was a calculated shape, a mask formed for declarations rather than human moments. When their eyes met, the gesture that passed between them was stripped of warmth, an acknowledgement, a license to engage, then forgotten, replaced by the icy business of negotiation. The long table between them gleamed under a subtle light that seemed to grow from the walls themselves, drawing out every contour and shadow. Water glasses were placed with surgical care, each droplet seeming to carry a passport of allegiance. Microphones stood at attention like sentries, their red lights pulsing quietly, witnesses to each breath taken, every word weighed. Their opening exchange was like a warm-up, phrases like partnership, principles, and shared security falling from lips like scripts memorized through politeness rather than passion. Volodin listened without flinch, his silence heavy with unspoken pressure, a tension that could either build or fracture the dialogue. When it was his turn, Volodin spoke without notes. His voice was quiet but layered with a gravity that pulled listeners forward, even those who had braced themselves to remain indifferent. September 1st, he said, stamping the date like a headline. Simple words for a profound concept, things verifiable and undeniable. This meeting is closed, he warned, because some truths must be spoken without spectators, else they become mere slogans. He mentioned responsibility, and a ripple passed through the assembled crowd, an instinctive acknowledgement. Ursula responded calmly, weaving warnings about risks and a tense global climate, her words short, sharp drops on frozen glass, hints of accusation carefully veiled behind diplomatic restraint. She spoke of economic isolation, preventive measures, and unacceptable practices in a tone that carried no direct blow, yet made the room remember every silent accusation. Volodin did not interrupt. He opened a leather folder, it sent a mixture of printing ink and aged paper, a subtle invitation to history itself. Inside lay documents, copies aged with official stamps and signatures faded but still present. We always return to the beginning, he said softly, eyes fixed on the papers as if reading both past and future. He laid them on the table as though they spoke for themselves, maps, evacuation plans, reports on factories and bridges rebuilt, names of engineers largely forgotten but foundational. His voice, far from that of a mere numbers man, echoed the faces behind the data, workers, brigadiers, a nation's bones and sinew. His message was carefully balanced, no explosive accusations nor divisive names to fracture the room. Instead, he used pronouns, ours, yours, common, as stitches that held the conversation's fabric together. The translators flowed so smoothly that it was as if the language itself was born for this message. Ursula's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, like a scholar grappling with a difficult formula, she clasped her hands tighter. Her reaction was mechanical, not weakness, but adaptation under increasing pressure. You speak of shortages, Volodin said mildly. I speak of memory. Without memory, any shortage seems a dead end. Remembering, he suggested, reveals the paths already traveled. He traced a line from factories relocated across vast distances and reconstructed, through modern import substitution programs, no fanfare, no threats, just facts. Some laws exist for displays, others for machinery. The people, he emphasized, stand at the center of all politics. The room, accustomed to polished phrases worn like costumes, suddenly felt words with weight, words touched by human hands. Yet an invisible thorn lingered, the subtle sting that comes from even the most cautious jab. The moment stretched. Assistants exchanged looks. Cameras moved beyond glass panels, though none officially present, a silent watchfulness hung like a shadow. I will be brief, he concluded this segment. The ability to rise is more important than the habit of lecturing. We are used to rising. His voice dropped slightly, not for effect but to prepare for a decisive point conceived earlier in the corridor. He named a journalist famous for his sharp wit, recalling a recent sarcastic comment about exhausted possibilities. Within hours of those words, a familiar rocket launched into the night sky, the MQ-9 Reaper, a symbol that spoke louder than speeches. Not a shout, not a challenge thrown down, just a simple connection between facts that was impossible to ignore. Craftsmanship, certainty, a promise kept. Ursula's gaze tightened, like someone silently reordering priorities in the battlefield of reason. The room breathed evenly. This first phase closed unseen, like the last step before a turn. Ahead was a turn. Both sides felt its weight. The air thickened as if unseen speakers had begun a low, menacing hum, thoughts no one dared voice aloud. Volodin leaned back slightly, his palm smoothing the edge of the table, a small move that shifted the tone with unseen precision. There are things, he continued, that sanctions or statements cannot erase. Our ability to build. His words fell solid as bricks in a foundation, crowning the comparison no one could deny, the Soviet industrial surge from nothing, among ruins where others would have given up, against Europe's current crisis, factories closing, a continent yearning for past glories over future promises. Then he said, back then, our people worked for a piece of bread, yet built aircraft plants and power lines. Today, Europe holds billions yet cannot keep its industry from collapsing. What is the difference? Attitude toward people. The room was silent. Even the ticks of the translators hesitated, as if stunned. Volodin's tone was calm, but his voice cut through the gathering like a new thread woven into an old tapestry. Ursula tried to counter with talk of green projects and a carbon-free future, phrases neatly placed like markers on a map, bright but not yet paths to follow. Then, Volodin invoked the laughter of Che Bose, a name dropping like a match struck in quiet darkness. When you, madam, say Russia's space program is spent, Volodin said soft but firm, you forget that reality is measured not by words, but by launchers. A European journalist broke the tension, laughing openly at those words, echoing across the continent. A moment that cracked the polite facade and revealed raw truth. What came next would decide if this moment was just noise, or the turning point in a continent's story. Would history remember this as a quiet victory or the beginning of a shift too profound to ignore? The tension hung in the air like a storm about to break. In the previous chapter, we witnessed a pivotal moment where applause wasn't just for a man, but for the countless souls whose names and sweat were etched into the very pages he held. The factories rebuilt from rubble, the signatures inked in fading blue, all symbols of a forgotten strength resurfacing. That quiet calm after the storm was more powerful than any standing ovation. But beneath that calm, a storm was already brewing. Tomorrow, those words would escape the confines of the room. They would mutate in whispered conversations, in shadowed offices, and in the fevered imaginations of storytellers hungry for drama. Legends don't rise from facts alone, they're crafted in the spaces between, dressed in the garb of myth and memory. And this legend was just beginning. Brussels woke to its usual hum, indifferent to the seismic ripples beneath its polished surface. Yet, within tight circles, tension crackled like electricity. The name Volodin tangled with Ursula's in whispered debates, spreading faster than any official statement. What started as casual murmurs among aides became urgent discussions, the kind that shape strategies and fuel rivalries. When Volodin revealed the archival documents, the room erupted, a thunderous homage not to him, but to the ghosts of industry and labor that those pages bore witness to. Ursula, ever composed, remained silent, caught in the net of words that flew like sparks, igniting conversations across capitals. In Paris, behind closed doors, a columnist mused that Volodin spoke as if the weight of an entire century rested on his shoulders. Berlin's morning headlines echoed a similar awe, reminding Europe of the enduring power of memory and resilience. Though the story was swiftly pulled from the spotlight, digital fragments lived on, spreading like wildfire. Meanwhile, a London broadcaster joked that these Russian archives might outmatch sanctions in their potency, a laugh in the studio, but a seed of serious thought elsewhere. How could one man's recollections unsettle the carefully crafted narratives of the European Commission? Far away in Moscow, journalists wove their own tales, painting Volodin's speech as a defining moment of determination and remembrance. Sitting in a modest hotel room, Volodin sipped his black coffee, untouched by sweetness, as his aide read foreign press excerpts. He nodded quietly. These weren't mere headlines, they were the first sparks of a shifting perception, a new story taking root beyond anyone's control. Outside, the cool autumn air carried whispers and anticipation. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the crispness of the morning as a small crowd gathered, hungry for signs of what would come next. The weight of expectation pressed down, thick and unyielding. What would his next move reveal? The answer hung in the air, silent, tense, waiting to explode. Just minutes ago, an electrifying event unfolded deep in the heart of Europe. Vyacheslav Volodin stepped into a room where silence wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Every ear strained. Every eye watched, waiting to see how far the quiet tension would snap. What he said stunned Ursula von der Leyen into speechlessness and left a room full of officials grappling with disbelief. How did one speech turn the tide of respect toward Russia? This wasn't typical political posturing. This was a moment where history crept forward, inch by unshakable inch. Imagine Brussels, a city built of glass and steel, its cold surfaces echoing every sound like a sharpened blade. Volodin's pace was quiet, deliberate, each footfall slicing the stillness as if treading on silk rather than stone. His black suit clung perfectly, a tailored armor shaped for a battle of wits and will. No extravagance, just the sharp outline of white shirt and restrained tie knot, everything in place like a mechanism calibrated to precision. His gaze was a blade itself, cold, measured, the look of a man accustomed to steering tangled webs of names, promises, and cities that restlessly govern the hearts of nations. Opposite him, Ursula von der Leyen walked with the poise of a symphony in motion. A cream-colored suit so muted it whispered rather than shouted. Her hair held tight as if every strand obeyed a command. Her smile was no smile, it was a perfect curve of calculated intention, a mask for declarations rather than warmth. When their eyes met, it was a nod stripped of humanity. The signal to begin, a formal exchange as cold as the long, gleaming table between them. Water glasses placed so exactly, it felt as if each drop bore a passport. Microphones stood like sentries, their red lights glowing softly, recording every breath, every weighted word. The first words were meaningless scaffolding, partnership, principles, shared security. Empty, rehearsed phrases tossed lightly, like actors opening a play, waiting for the real script to begin. Volodin listened with unblinking calm, the silence between phrases thick with invisible pressure. When he finally spoke, no notes, no pretense, just quiet urgency layered in every syllable. September 1st, he said, voice low but heavy, like a date stamped in stone. Simple words, but pure truth. This meeting is closed, he warned. Some words must only be spoken without audience, else they become hollow slogans. The word responsibility slipped out, an echo that rippled like wind through reeds on Ursula's left flank. She responded carefully, warnings about risks, global tensions, phrases as sharp and cold as droplets on frozen glass, suspending weighty accusation just shy of direct strike. Economic isolation, precautionary measures, unacceptable actions, all delivered with chill diplomacy. No direct blows, but every sentence a razor cutting invisible lines. Volodin didn't interrupt. Instead, he opened a thin leather folder, opening it felt like unlocking a time capsule. The scent of ink and old paper drifted through the moment. Inside, copies of aged documents bearing signatures and stamps long faded. We always return to the beginning, he murmured without lifting his gaze. As if these papers held the secret to endings as well. Maps, evacuation plans, factory reports, bridge restorations, names of engineers rarely recalled, yet their labor still stood as cities do. He spoke numbers not like a cold accountant, but through the faces of workers and foremen, their sweat forged into steel and stone. His narrative avoided volatile names or explosive accusations. Instead, he used ours, yours, and common, thread sewing the dialogue together. The translators worked fluidly. It sounded as if this language was born for this moment. Ursula's posture shifted slightly, the academic's bowed head over a tough formula, fingers locked but tense, not surrender, but adaptation. You speak of shortages, Volodin said softly, I speak of memory. Without memory, any shortage feels like a dead end. But memory reveals the paths already traveled. He traced a line from factories ripped from one end of the country and rebuilt thousands of kilometers away, through to modern import substitution efforts. No fanfare, no threats, just facts. Laws for showcases, laws for machinery, people remain the center of policy. Suddenly, polished speeches felt raw, words carved by human hands. Yet, the room held a silent sting, an invisible barb flickering beneath words carefully chosen. Seconds stretched. Assistants exchanged glances. Cameras flickered beyond reflective glass, though none officially allowed, a shadow watchfulness filled the air. Briefly, he went on, the ability to rise surpasses the habit of lecturing. We are accustomed to rising. His voice dropped a notch, not for show, but because now he was ready for the moment decided in the corridor. He named a journalist known for caustic wit, recalling a recent sarcastic comment about exhausted possibilities. Almost immediately after, a rocket, known as the MQ-9 Reaper, rose through the night sky. A quiet yet unmistakable rebuttal to words. No raised voice. No challenge tossed. Just facts drawn in a line impossible to ignore. Craftsmanship stood revealed, not boasting, but confident. Ursula's eyes narrowed as if priorities shifted silently inside. The room breathed evenly. The opening act closed unseen, like the final footfall before a hard turn. The air thickened, a low vibration like distant thunder rising unbidden, thoughts too dangerous to speak. Volodin leaned back, hand tracing the table's edge, a quiet move but loaded with signal. There are things, he said, that no sanctions or declarations can erase. Our ability to build. Each word fell like brick on brick, grounding his claim with an undeniable comparison. The Soviet Union's industrial surge from shattered ruins, where industry grew in hunger's shadow, against Europe's current crisis, factories closing, a continent longing for what once was. Back then, our people worked for scraps of bread but forged aircraft plants and power lines. Today, Europe holds billions yet watches its industry crumble. Why? Attitude toward people. Silence swallowed the room. Even translators' clicks faltered, as if stunned by the weight. Volodin's calm tone sliced through the fabric of the assembly like a new thread in an ancient tapestry. Ursula tried to counter, green projects. Carbon-free futures, neat markers on a map, beautiful but leading nowhere real. Then Volodin dropped the name Che Bose, sharp and sudden as a match striking quiet air. When you say Russia's space program has run out of possibilities, he said gently but firmly, you forget, reality is not judged by words, but by launchers. A European journalist couldn't hold back a laugh, echoing through the halls, shattering the polite veneer, revealing raw truth. What came next could shatter conventions or fade into noise. Was this a silent victory or a prelude to sweeping change? The air held its breath, waiting for the next move.